And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is the author Kevin J. Briggs, who specializes in consciousness and the connection to ETs and UFOs. Kevin, thank you for joining me and welcome.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate you. I should be thanking you for having me on your show, because without people like yourself, I can't get the message out from my ET star families that they've asked me to share with everyone now. So thank you for inviting me on your show.
Kevin, now you've had ET experiences for the past 60 years. How did this all start?
Yes, that's correct. I'm now 68, and my journey started when I was 3 years old. The actual first contact with the extraterrestrials, the star families, I was 8 years old. So you're correct, that was 60 years ago. When I was 3 years old, my mother engaged a photographer to take some photographs for a family album. The photographer arrived, and I was lifted up onto the oak dining room table for a better elevated position. And from that elevated position, I looked around the room and realized that I was conscious again in a physical body. I was aware of the fact that I was looking out from a physical. So that was the beginning of my journey, just understanding that as a child. And then the actual first contact, as I mentioned, I was 8 years old. I was taking a bath, and I was always sensitive to the vibrational frequencies that are around it. And I felt a change in the bathroom. I looked to my right, and two beings appeared. They were slightly elevated off the floor, both human in appearance, both very attractive, one male, one female. They were wearing a tight-fitting blue jumpsuit-type garment, and they both had long, blonde, shoulder-length hair, very attractive, deep blue eyes, and they were speaking to one another telepathically, which I could understand. And it frightened me to death at the time, Jeff, as you can imagine, as an 8-year-old boy. And the Ort, that was the male, and D was the female. I know them well now. I've been in contact with them all my life. D said to Ort, "Is this the boy?" And Ort said, "Yes, this is the boy." And then she questioned him again, "Are you sure this is the boy?" He said, "Yes, this is the boy." And then she said, "But look at him, he's small, he's uneducated, and he's frightened by our presence." And she was correct. I was terrified. He said, "No, this is the boy. I will guide him. I will teach him." There was some other conversation within that, and then they left. And as I said, I was frightened. I didn't get out of the bath. The water went cold. I was shivering. My mother came in to see why I was still in the bath with the water being cold. And I said to her, I told her about the two beings, and she said it was just my imagination. It wasn't. I've been in contact with them all my life. And Art was true to his word. He's guided me. He's taught me all my life. And the main thread of that education has been one of consciousness, shared consciousness. So I feel very privileged that they came down and assisted me with my education, which continues to this day. I'm still learning. I'm still being taught. I'm still being guided. The next interaction, I would have been 9 years old. And I'd had some friends round on a Sunday. We'd been playing, and it was time for them to leave to go home for their tea, for their dinner. And I showed them out the back door. As I turned round, I felt the presence in the home, another vibrational frequency that wasn't there as my friends had left. So I went looking for this frequency, and I couldn't find it. I went upstairs in the bedrooms. I went back down into the living room where it was strongest, and I was drawn towards the curtains, the drapes. I looked behind the curtains, and there was an orb there, orange, yellow in color, slightly vibrating, 5-6 inches across. And there was no communication. And I wasn't certain at that time what that was. I now know that was Ort's pure conscious energy without his physical. There was no communication at that moment in time. And he was there for a whole week. I hoped he'd disappear the following morning, but I got up in the morning and I realized that he was still there. And it wasn't until I came home on Friday from school about 4 o'clock, I opened the back door and I realized that the orb had gone, the energy had gone. But what had happened then, my psychic abilities had been enhanced no end, to the point where I was able to use my conscious energy and separate it from my physical body and go and travel outside of the physical body. As a young child, as a 9-year-old, I used to just travel to my grandparents' home, who they lived about 70 miles away in Liverpool. I lived in Wakefield at the time. And I would just leave my body, relax, go over to their home, enter through the roof, and go and sit upstairs. Or they had a dressing room off the master bedroom upstairs. And I would look down through the floor, which was opaque, and I could see my grandmother usually cooking on a Sunday, my grandfather usually watching the TV or reading the newspaper. And it gave me great comfort to go and see them. I didn't realize the potential of that at a young age of 9. So that's how I used to use that particular modality of travel, really, using thought and consciousness, separation of that conscious energy. I didn't know any of that then. I was just a child. And I often wondered, though, when I was sat there, if my grandparents came upstairs into the bedroom, into the dressing room where I was sat, what would they see? And I now know the answer to that. They would have seen a conscious energy orb, 4 to 6 inches across, slightly vibrating, orangey yellow in color. That will be my pure conscious energy outside of the physical. So I'm aware of that now because I've learned how to use that. I've learned how to travel outside of the body, how to communicate with my ET star families using that one modality of contact. There are many other modalities that we use. So it's really, my journey's just been a progression and education in relation to consciousness, as I said. And I have all the abilities in relation to consciousness with the healing, the communication, the travel, the education, the creation and co-creation that our ET star families have. And they've educated me to that level. So if they can do that with me, Jeff, they can do that with anybody. So we're all in that position, and we need to learn these things to evolve the species. So that's part of the journey, part of what I'm trying to get out there to people, to members of the public, to those that are interested, or to those who have their own contact and maybe a little bit frightened of speaking out to others, to family and friends, because of fear of ridicule. But there are many now that I speak with and make communication with who have their own contact. So I think the next stage in my connection with my ET, I was 14 years old. I had a paper route. And when I left the home, every morning, a UFO would appear above the house. And then as I'm walking towards the paper shop to collect my papers, a second UFO would appear. And they would follow me around the paper round until I'd finished. And then one would go back in the direction it come from, and one would usually go straight up into space. So, but at the time when they were following me, I was always aware of a presence behind the fence, behind the wall. As I say, I was susceptible to feeling these different frequencies as a child. So on one occasion, I plucked up courage and I said, I know you're there. Can you show yourself? And 2 small greys stepped out from behind the hedge. I wasn't frightened by them. I asked what did they want, and they said there was a group of people that wished to meet with me, and would I go with them? And I said, well, I've got my paper round to finish, and I've got to go to school this morning. And they said, well, you can finish your paper round, and we'll have you back in time for school. So I finished the round. I agreed to go with them, and I was taken up to what I believe was a large mothership. The reason why I came to that conclusion was because when we entered the hangar, it was huge, absolutely huge. All these different shapes of crafts that we all see, that people report, they were all there, a huge amount of them. Anyway, I was led down to a amphitheater. I walked into the amphitheater, and it was full of people. And at the bottom of the amphitheater, on a stage, there was a table with 8 beings sat on that table. And those were the beings that I was being there to be introduced to. And I went up on the stage. I wasn't frightened by the event. I just thought I was there as a human specimen to be paraded in front of people. And I was introduced to the 8. The first 2 were Orton D, the ones that had materialized in my bathtub. So I hadn't seen them since I was 8. I'm now 14. But they're sat here on this table in this craft with 6 other beings. The next being sat next to them that I was introduced to was Anna. She was a blue bird type being, very empathic. Next to her was Zark. He's a small grey. He's a mathematician and engineer. And then sat next to him was Ra. He was the leader of the group. He's Anunnaki, he tells me, 9th dimensional being. And next to him was Targ. He was a tall grey, and he was responsible for the security not only of this Council of 8, but for this quadrant of the galaxy. And I had thought of the galaxies being split into quadrants. And then after him was Chica. When I was introduced to him, I was a bit perturbed because he was a mantis being, just like a big tall grasshopper, or like the mantis beings we have here, the small ones, the praying mantis. And I was a bit perturbed by him because he had these big bulging eyes. And, it was unusual to see such what I thought was a very large insect. And then lastly was Orla. She was a tall white. She was a very pale complexion, large eyes, and she had translucent hair. And those were the 8 that I was taken there to be introduced to. And as I say, initially I thought I was just a human specimen there, just to be paraded. And I realize that now that wasn't the case. The Council of 8, if I've now come to know them, were sat at the table, and all the amphitheatre that was full with all the delegates. No different to we would have at the UN or our governments. That's how they do their governmental work, as it were. And they were just doing the same, but I was there being introduced to that particular group. And I understand that of why. And probably now my next encounter would be 17 or 18. I can't remember the exact date, but I know where I was living at the time. And I was trying to find other people that had contact with ETs, contact with higher dimensional beings, whatever label you want to put on them. So I asked my family and friends in a third party. I would say, I have a friend of mine who travels outside of his body. He's able to meet with deceased family members and meet with ETs. Do you know anybody that can do that? And they all said, no, no, no. So I thought, well, I need to ask D. So one night I went to bed, I relaxed, and I opened my mind. I held out my hand and I said, Ort, I know there's much more to this, and I can't find anybody that can give me some more information. Can you come and show me and give me some more information? He came, he took hold of my hand. I left my body, nothing unusual for me. Been doing that since I was 9. I'm now 17, 18. And I looked down, I could see my body asleep. And we left through the window. We flew around the subdivision. Bearing in mind, this is out of body travel. Came back into the window and I looked down. I was still asleep. I went back into my body. I woke up that morning and I wasn't certain whether I was dreaming. So I thought about it during the day and I thought I'll do the same thing the following night. So that evening, I relaxed. I opened my mind. I asked Ort to come and show me some more. He came, he took hold of my hand. I looked down, I was fast asleep. We went out through the window. We went down into the Leeds city centre. I recognised the buildings there, the museum, the hospital, the university where I worked at the time as a technician. And then we flew back in through the window. And again, my body was asleep. And I went back into my body. So I woke up the second morning, still not convinced I wasn't sleepwalking or dreaming. So I thought I would try it for a third night. On the third night, exactly the same process, relaxed, opened my mind, asked Ort to come show me some more. He came and I said, before we go, I said, can we go out through the roof? Because I'm a bit perturbed about going out through the window. We're 3 stories up, with concrete pavement below, and I'm still not certain whether I'm dreaming or sleepwalking. So I said, yes, no problem. So we went out to the roof, we travelled around, came back into the roof, and my body was asleep, and I went back into my body, into my physical body. So that was the third morning. So by this time, I realised it was just part of the education, something that we're not used to doing, but clearly had the guidance of Ort, and that's what he said he would do when I was 8 years old. I think then I used to travel with him quite a bit doing that. And then on one occasion, he came to me and he said that, Kevin, I'm going to take you somewhere special this evening. Will you come with me? I said, yes, I'll go anywhere you want to go. So he took hold of my hand. Again, I always look down to see if my body's there. It's not going anywhere. And it was fast asleep. We went out to the roof and we kept going up and up and up and up. And the earth got smaller and smaller and smaller. And we went into a higher dimension. And when we went into that dimension, there was a line of people there, a line of 30 people, all stood waiting to greet me. And I could feel this eminence of love coming from this group, just tremendous. At the front of the line, the front of the group, was my father. He'd been deceased. He died when I was 9 years old. And he was stood up. And I'd never seen him standing because when I was born, he was in a wheelchair. And so it was nice to see him standing, his beaming face, and he greeted me. And as I say, this love that emanated from the whole group was just tremendous. He said, Kevin, I'm going to introduce you to your family members going back over 30 generations. So we went down the line. I was introduced to each one. They told me what they did for a living in their past incarnation. And then when we got halfway down the line, it was very interesting because they didn't have what appeared to be a physical. They were orbs, the conscious energy orbs that I'd seen before, orange, yellowing in colour, slightly vibrating, 6 to 8 inches across. But they still communicated telepathically, and they could show me telepathic images of their last incarnations. So I went down the line, introduced, and I went to go and meet these people on a regular basis over a 2-year period. And I got to such a point that I didn't need Ort to go with me. I could go on my own, at my own will when I wanted to go. But then after a couple of years, I found it more and more difficult to get back into my physical. So I thought one day, what should I do? I cannot just not go back and see them again. I'll have to go back one more time and let them know I won't be coming back. So that evening, I relaxed, opened my mind. I went to visit them. Again, that tremendous feeling of love that emanates from this group. And I told them that I wouldn't be coming back to see them again for the reasons I've mentioned. They tried to persuade me to stay. And I said, no, if I stay here, my physical will pass. And I've got things I want to do. I'm enjoying my physical. And I say I've got things that I want to do. So I know that you're here. I know that when my physical does pass, then I will come back and I will join you. But between now and then, I'm going to enjoy my physical life. And I went back into my body, and I've never been back to see them since. And I say about 17 or 18 years of age at this moment in my life. But I know that they're there. And if I need help, I can ask them for help, which I do all the way through my life. I've been fortunate to have the guidance of Ort D and the Council of It and the deceased family members, friends, because we're all part of that shared consciousness. And I'm here at the moment enjoying a physical, but I'm still spiritual in nature. I always think of myself as symbiotic. I'm a spiritual person and a physical person enjoying this physical reality. So that would be when I got to, 17, 18, I said. And then after that, it went a little bit quiet until I was in my early 30s. And then I'd been working a double shift at work, which we call a quick changeover, and where you work 6 while 2, and then, 12, 6 in the morning, and then you come back and do another quick changeover. And I was always tired when I did those because I came home at 2 o'clock the following day. So I'd usually go to bed for a couple of hours till my wife came home from work. And on this occasion, I got into bed and a shadow person came into the bedroom and beckoned me. Well, they don't do that normally. They'll just fleet about behind the furniture, behind the sofa or something, very mischievous. And I told him to go away because I was tired. And he went away, walked through the door. He came back a couple of minutes later, beckoned me again. And I said, no, I'm tired, go away, come back. He went, and he came back for a third time. So I said, right, okay, you obviously want to show me something, I'll get up. I didn't get dressed. He disappeared through the door. I opened the door, walked onto the landing, and there's a beam of light there from the floor to the ceiling. I would describe it as like the transporters on Star Trek. If you've ever seen that, the beam of light when they transport down to the planet. Well, I said, you've gone to all this trouble. I'm going to step into the light. So I stepped into the light, and this voice said to me, I am your father. You are your father's son. I felt euphoric as I stepped into the light, and the light stayed for a few moments. I just heard that one voice speak to me. I know now that was Ra. That was the lead council, the Anunnaki of this Council of Eight. And when he left, the beam of light went from the floor and the ceiling sequentially and disappeared in my chest, abdomen area. And I say I was still euphoric. I was no longer tired. I got up, I took my dogs out. When my wife came home, I told her about the event. And we went out that evening for a meal, which I would never do when we'd done a quick changeover shift. So that took me up to 32. And just to round it up, because I know we're running out of time, 5 years ago, I got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. I came back from the bathroom, got back into bed. There was a bright light outside the bedroom window. The light came into the bedroom, lit it up like a myriad of butterflies, but it was just bright, pure white light. And then Orton D materialized at the bottom of the bed. After pleasantries, I asked what they wanted. They said, Kevin, we want you to write about your lifelong interactions with us. We want you to speak about it. I said, well, I don't mind speaking, but I'm not a writer. They said, well, we will continue to guide you. We will continue to teach you, and we will give you information to include in the book. And then Art said, in fact, you will write 2 books, Kevin. And we will, then he said, we will continue to guide you and give you information to include in the book. I've written the first book, Spiritual Consciousness, A Personal Journey. And at the moment, I'm writing the second book now. So that's really, in a nutshell, there's a lot more to this. It's a huge story, Jeff, but that might interest your listeners because when they realize that, our deceased family members and friends are still alive, just at a higher level of consciousness. And people are very interested in people who have near-death experiences. They're able to access those higher levels of consciousness, as I am able to do at will, because I've been taught how to do that by my ET star family. So I hope your listeners enjoy that. And if they've got any questions, anything they want to give me, they can contact me on my email. I'm open to speaking to anybody. And my email is just my name, Kevin James Briggs @gmail.com. So anybody's welcome to contact me. If you've got your own contact and you're a little bit apprehensive, send me an email. I can communicate with you and help you on your journey.
Kevin, thank you for sharing your story with us. When you went and visited your ancestors, I felt like you were having an NDE.
I'd never thought about that, Jeff. That's that may be a possibility. Perhaps I hadn't thought of it that way. The way I see it is I'm just separating the conscious energy from the physical, and the physical is still alive without the conscious energy. But I was feeling at the end of that 2-year period that I was having more difficulty getting back into the physical, and that's why I stopped. Perhaps, it's a very good question, that. I don't think it was an NDE. It was my choice to travel. And because I have had that ability from the age of 9, it wasn't anything unusual for me. The only thing that was unusual was the fact of meeting my deceased family and friends. And I've met deceased friends before when they've passed. And I still do to this day. They'll come and visit. And there's a story in my book, Spiritual Consciousness, about my Uncle Alec. And that's a fascinating story. After he passed, he kept coming backwards and forwards, but communicating with me and my wife. Quite an interesting story, really. So it's not just about ETs, it's about consciousness itself. The ETs, the higher extraterrestrials, are just part of that. And we're as important within that consciousness itself as they are. We just need to open up those lines of communication.
Yeah, I should have said an NDE without the trauma.
Yes, because mine were quite enjoyable. I enjoyed it. It was entertainment for me. I enjoyed going and meeting with them. I enjoyed the interaction, the emotional interaction with them, and it was just a part of who I am. And the traveling out of body, I would when we were about 17 again, about 17 or 18. Uh, I didn't have cell phones then. I didn't have a phone. I had to walk down to the local call box at the top of the street, and I would just use it. I would think, oh, go and see Gary, see if he wants to go out for lunch today. Instead of walking over to his home, I'd just leave my body, go over to his house, see if he was there, and then I would set off and meet him. So I just used it. But I thought at that age, everybody had these abilities. It was just normal, but people didn't talk about it. I realized that, but we probably do have them. We haven't developed them. Although there are many now that I've met that do have these abilities, and remote viewing, which is very similar, which anybody can learn to do. So yeah, we're much more than we know, Jeff. Much more than we're taught, and I was fortunate to have that education of with and guided by OD and the Council of Eight to some degree. So yeah.
Kevin, how do you define consciousness?
That's a very good question. A very difficult question. I can tell you what they've told me about consciousness. They've told me that, let me see if I can remember it now. The conscious energy exists at the subatomic level, at the quantum level, between, now what did it say, between the spaces as light frequencies. So conscious energy, light frequencies in all matter, and dependent on the level of that frequency will depend on what level of cognitive abilities, shall we say, that we have, those different levels of consciousness. So if you imagine a rock is conscious because it has a light frequency between the subatomic particles, that makes it conscious. But it's not at a higher level of consciousness because it's not at that level where it can use that conscious energy, that light frequency, for communication and all the other interactions that consciousness allows us to do. Does that make sense? I'm not a scientist, Jeff. So, they give me these downloads of scientific information, and then they'll explain them to me if I ask a question. But I'm not a scientist per se, but I have my own understanding of it. Because when they give me downloads, then they'll give me an experience in relation to the download to help explain it. So, so in answer to the question, consciousness are light frequencies in all matter.
I was checking out the back of your book, and it talks about how do we know we are conscious? Can you tell us about that?
Well, that's a very good question again. Well, I think I know that I'm conscious because I interact with other conscious beings. I don't interact with the rocks, I must admit, but I interact with plants, trees, animals, other human beings. I interact with higher conscious beings. I interact with the ETs. I interact with my deceased families and friends. And all the conduit and connection for that is consciousness itself. They are the conduits for communication, for travel, for healing, for education, for creation and co-creation. And I'm just a part of that. And I have an understanding. So they're also told me that the universe itself is conscious, but if we see the universe as light energy, light frequency, then and we're all a part of that, then that's how we're able to use this conscious energy for all the things I've outlined. And I think once we all learn that, then we will evolve as a species. And that's why they're asking me to share the information they've given to me. And it's not just me, Jeff. I'm a very, very small piece in a very large jigsaw. There are many others. And I found now that each of us, I've joined some different groups. I've joined Rebecca Hardcastle's group, the Exo Consciousness group. And each person in that group have got specific abilities with what I've been outlining in relation to consciousness and how it can be used. And it's fascinating when you meet other people who have their own contact with ETs, who have an understanding. There's a few in one of the groups I'm in, and they're tremendous healers. They have a great understanding of how our bodies can be healed, how we can heal ourselves. They haven't educated me within that realm, as it were, although I've got experiences of healing myself, experiences of my ET star families healing me. But these other people, their specific education has been one on healing, quantum healing, which, our sciences don't teach those. So clearly, there are many being guided to help facilitate the evolution of our species. So I think it's very exciting times ahead, Jeff, for us as a species, for humanity. So hopefully that we will all continue to learn and grow as a species.
If we go back to the beginning, the male ET was telling D, "This is the boy." And that to me suggests that he knew who you were. He was looking for you. You weren't just some random human on the planet. If that's true, do you think that you made some agreement pre-birth?
I would think so. Yeah. With the knowledge that I have now, I've got memories of two previous lives, or should I say, two previous deaths, because they were violent deaths, and I remembered them. I remembered them as a child, and I would explore them as a child. So I believe, yeah, I probably signed up for this. Orton D did tell me that I'm part of their extended family. They are Arcturian from Andromeda. The only difference between me and them is I live in the third dimension, which is a lower vibrational frequency, and they live in the fifth dimension. So they're just the different levels of that consciousness. But because they've taught me up to their level of the fifth dimensional level, how they use consciousness for communication, travel, healing, and all that stuff that I keep repeating. And if I'm part of their extended family, then other people here, other humans, are part of someone else's extended family. So we have to learn that. We're like in the kindergarten, and they're in the already got their PhD at university. So we're still learning, I think. But I think the key is openness. I think because we are, as a species, I think we are brainwashed by what we see on the TV. But I think that's done on purpose to control us as a species. But we are evolving, and hopefully, well, I'm very confident for the future, Jeff. There's many people speaking out now, and if one person disappears, it doesn't matter, because the way that each person has got a bit of the information. If, say, I disappeared tomorrow, it wouldn't matter, because it's just one small piece of the jigsaw that you've lost, and the whole picture is still there. So we'd have to lose a lot of these small pieces of the jigsaw. So we're heading in the right direction. They are here. They are guiding us. They are very concerned about the pollution on our planet at the moment. They're very concerned about Fukushima leaking the radioactive materials into the sea there, to the ocean. But they do say they've got technologies that can help clean up our pollution, and they're willing to share that if we reach out to them and we make that open contact where they can reveal themselves globally to us as a species. And that's where we're heading, really. It's just about a time scale now. In fact, they just recently, they asked me, they wanted a mandated protocol to be implemented to receive them. And I'd contacted some members of our government in the UN a couple of years ago in relation to this, to no avail. So now they tell me that the reveal of their presence globally will come from the citizens of Earth, and with a request from the citizens of Earth. But they need a mandated protocol implemented to receive them. They told me what they required in that mandated protocol. So I actually wrote it down. I signed it. My wife witnessed it. Kathleen Marden, Denise Stoner, Dr. Melanie Barton signed and ratified. So we now have a mandated protocol in place for the citizens of Earth to make a request via the different experiences here who have their own direct contact, maybe a group of experiences, to make that formal request. In fact, I have a copy here. Oh, I've just seen it over there. I used it yesterday. I read it out to a group, and it's a mandated protocol. Do we have time to read it? It's only 2 paragraphs, or?
Yeah, sure.
Because of my understanding of consciousness, what I'm really trying to do here, what I am doing here, I'm creating a future reality. I'm co-creating a future reality with our ET star families using thought and consciousness. And that's how we create the reality. And because I understand that, and I've written down, I've now manifested the document. It's part of my consciousness. And to other people that I share it with, it becomes part of their consciousness. And then it becomes part of the collective consciousness. So we all understand that. And that's where we're heading, really. And I think, again, that's one of the reasons they've educated me into an understanding of consciousness itself. So to lead us to this point. So I'll just read this. If it's only a short couple of minutes. I've titled it Mandated Protocol to Receive Our ET Star Families Ambassadors. Individuals on our planet are currently being engaged by our ET star families. Our governments are aware of this. At this time, they are not ready to receive the ambassadors. The ET star families ambassadors are requesting a mandated protocol to be ratified and implemented by the citizens of Earth to receive them. Within the mandated protocol will be provisions for the safety and security of the star families on approach to the planet, while in our atmosphere and on the ground at mutually agreed designated time, date, and location. When implemented, we, the citizens of Earth, can reach out with our own ambassadors for the reveal of our ET star families with a mutual exchange of cultures, technologies, and pave the way for a new society, a society we desire for our children, for our future generations, a new society we co-create with our ET star families, one that will include them. The second paragraph of title, Protocol for Peaceful Contact with our ET star families. Creation, co-creation, intent for a mandated protocol to receive our ET star families ambassadors. I have been informed by my ET guides that they require a mandated protocol in place to guarantee their safety and security when invited to Earth for meetings, interactions, and cultural exchange. My ET guides also inform me that the reveal of their presence globally will come from a request from the citizens of Earth. We use thought and consciousness, intent, to create our reality. I propose because we as exo-conscious humans have an understanding of this, we should lead with the intention, creation, co-creation with our ET star families ambassadors. This will be the intention of this proposed mandated protocol, being co-created through thought and consciousness. Included in these thoughts will be the protection and security of the craft and their occupants approaching Earth, while flying in our atmosphere at landings, meetings, predetermined dates, times, and location. And then the last line is, in witness thereof, the undersigned being authorized by their birthright as born of this earth. And then I signed it, my wife witnessed it, Kathleen Marden signed it and ratified it, Denise Stoner signed it and ratified it, Dr. Melanie Barton signed and ratified. So we now have a document that they've requested that we have co-created. So that's where we're heading now. And as I say, the next step will be for a group of experiencers who have their own contact to get together to create their own council here, shall we say, and make that open invitation to them. So we are moving forward, and I think we have to move forward quickly because I think the alternative is we evolve as a species, and that evolvement means becoming a galactic species, and we need assistance with that. Or the alternative is we annihilate ourselves and we start again. But my ET guys tell me that they don't want that. They want to assist us. They are here to assist us. And I'm very confident, happy. I think we have a very bright future.
Did you send a copy of this to the UN as well?
No, not this particular one, no. Well, on the original time when I spoke to the UN, or should I say, Nicholas Hedman's office, he's the chairman of the Outer Space Affairs Committee. I sent him an email asking if there was a mandated protocol implemented to receive our ET star families. He replied that there wasn't at this moment in time. I asked him, well, how would we do that? And he said that you would have to get a member state to promote that for a vote at the United Nations. So I left it at that moment in time. And then a little bit later on, I was given a specific time date. I can't remember without looking at my notes. I know it was February the 1st. My ET guides wanted to meet with the United Nations in New York at this particular date. So I contacted the office again of Nicholas Hedman, and I also wrote to Dr. DiPippo, Washington, D.C., their office there, with the same request. I didn't hear back from either of them. And I wasn't surprised because it's a huge leap from someone that they don't know saying there's a group of ETs that want to meet with the United Nations. So, but what was very interesting, I wrote to them with the dates and things when they wanted to meet. 8 days after that, a friend of mine, Terry Lewis, who's an experienced himself, he's a retired law professor, he's a retired assistant attorney general for 2 jurisdictions, and he phoned me up. He said, Kevin, how are you? I said, I'm fine, how are you? He said, Kevin, I've been given, because I put all the information out there on Facebook and everything, he said, I've been given the same dates as you by my ET guides, because I've mentioned before there are many experiences now in the information. And I told him I'd already written to Nicholas Hedman's office in the UN in Vienna and the office with Dr. DiPippo in Washington. And he said, Kevin, I know Dr. DiPippo. I will write to him supporting what you're requesting. So he did. I've got copies of the emails. And he didn't receive a reply either. So then Terry went through the back channels of government that he knows. And in his words, he got the pushback. So our governments aren't ready yet. I'm sure they will be at some point in the future. I hope they have our best interest at heart. We will have to wait and see. But if not, like my ET guides say, we now have a mandated protocol implemented by the citizens of Earth. We can make our own request. And if the governments want to join in with us, then they're quite welcome. So we will have to see how we go. We have to do this. We, the citizens of Earth, have to do this. If not, then we might go down the second route of annihilation. So it is important that we move forward with this. And as I say, I'm not important in this. I'm just that one small piece of the jigsaw. There are many others with the other pieces as well. So if they're all put together under one roof, and then we, the experiencers, the exo-conscious humans, make that request, then perhaps it will be honoured. And I know that I've called the craft in on a couple of occasions, one at a conference in South Dakota, and the craft appeared and it was there for an hour and 20 minutes. I call them in at the back of my home and they'll come down. And so they are listening. I went to a friend's C5 group in Ocala a few weeks ago, and the craft appear at request. So we can ask them, well, many have got direct communication using important consciousness, telepathic communication, which I've had since obviously a child. I'm comfortable with my telepathic communication, and it's just one of the modalities of contact that they use that I'm confident and comfortable with. So we have that direct link, and I believe now that's why they've educated me to this level with all the modalities of consciousness which can be used for contact. So I think that's the importance of it.
You mentioned earlier that you could feel their presence when they're around. Can you share with us what does that feeling feel like?
It just feels like a tingling over the body. You can feel the higher vibrational frequency. Very similar if you have some speakers attached to your TV or your music centers or whatever, your music players, and they've got a very heavy bass or a high frequency, and you stand in front of those speakers, you can feel the energy of those speakers from the music or the sound. It's the same when they appear. If I was at a friend's house not so long ago, and we're having an afternoon cup of tea and some buns and some sandwiches and things, and I felt the presence. While we were chatting, the other people were experiencers as well, and I said to them, I can feel that you're here. Can you show the fact that you're here by flashing the two lamps that were on the sideboard? Nothing happened immediately. We finished the food, then we moved into the sitting room, and from there we were sat there just chatting, and the two lights started flashing. So, and now when I went to the C5 group with my friend Gary in Ocala, again the same thing there. We were just sat down eating, having some nibbles. I felt the presence, and I asked them to flash the lights, and they flashed the lights to confirm that they're there. And on that occasion, one of the ETs touched Gary on his leg and on his ankle, I think, and touched one of the other persons that was there physically. And they do that. They've done that to me. They grabbed my big toe in bed on 2 occasions and jumped on the bed physically to wake me up. So, but I'm not frightened. So I'm happy with that. I mean, the contact's just tremendous, really, if we are open to it.
One of the council members of 8 is named Ra. Is he related to the ancient Egyptian god?
Well, I asked him that question, and he spells his name R-A-H. He said he's not the god Ra of the Egyptian times, but he was alive in the Egyptian times. But I think it's we, the people, that put the label on him as the god Ra, because in those times, if someone came down in a large craft, had the technologies that they have, bearing in mind he's Anunnaki, then they would regard him as a god. When I asked him if he was a god, he said the god Ra. He said no. But I suspect, I don't know, it's the same person, because he tells me he's now a 9th dimensional being. He doesn't always have a physical. He chooses to move between the higher dimensional frequencies or the physical, and he does that at will. Obviously, I saw him in the physical on the craft when I was 14, but because he's able to transition backwards and forwards. So in answer to your question, he tells me he's not. I suspect, no, he's not a god, but it was him, because he's been around for over 5,000 years, he tells me. So that would incorporate those times and periods. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't have all the answers, unfortunately. But I did ask them if they believed in God. And they said, yes, they do, which I think that's a good thing. Yes, they do. But in a different way that we see it. They don't see God as one being that created everything. They see consciousness as being the supreme being, as it were, that creates everything, and it creates it through consciousness. So really what they're saying, yes, God is consciousness itself, and perhaps why, I know I'm not particularly religious type person, but perhaps that's why some of the teachings, the religious teachings, say that we each have a piece of God within us, and that would be the consciousness, the conscious energy. So it's just changing our concept of who we are, what God is, and but we'll leave that to the theologians. I'm sure they can work something out with the ETs and change their philosophies, their Bibles. They've done that in the past, and I'm sure they can do it again. So I don't see that being an issue really in relation to, it's just expanding our knowledge and seeing God in a different light, as I might say, as we've been talking about light frequencies. So if we see God in a different light rather than one being, encompassing all beings, all life, all of us, whether you be in the spiritual or whether you be in a physical. So but that's my opinion rather than what they've taught me, just from the information they've given me.
When you revealed your life and your contact to ETs to your wife, how did she react?
When I first met her, we worked together. We were both technicians at the university, and we started dating, going out. Then I was going to ask her if she would marry me. I thought, well, I better tell her about how I can see deceased people. I'm in contact with the ETs, because if I marry and she finds out later, she probably wouldn't be too pleased. Anyway, I told her, and she took it on the chin, as it were, and said, "Well, if you can see deceased people and ETs, I want to see them as well." And she now does. She now does see them. They'll show her a craft. She was allowed to take a photograph of a craft that appeared under a rainbow. Zark, one of the Council of Eight, he comes into our home. He moves her personal items around the home. I asked him why he did that, and he said he thought it was funny. He liked teasing her, but there was a serious side to let her know that we are here, we are amongst you. And then on one occasion, he moved all her shoes and lined them up in the walk-in closet next to the baseball board. And I knew he'd done it, so I asked him why he did it. And he said that was the answer he gave me, because he likes teasing her. He thinks it's funny, but the serious side is that we are here amongst you. But then I asked him, did you move the shoes physically? And he said, no, I moved the atoms in space-time dimension. Well, that's far above our physics, our understanding. And clearly that's where we need to head in relation, not only from the spiritual side of understanding who we are, but expanding our knowledge of technology and physics that incorporates the universe, as it were, and then we can expand and, say, grow and become our own galactic species.
Did he appear in front of you kind of like a translucent or transparent ghost, or did he appear as an orb or something physical?
Well, initially, my Uncle Alec always smoked a pipe all his life, and he smoked St. Bruno tobacco. I don't know if you've ever smelt the smell. It's a very nice smell, actually. It's a sweet smell. So when after he passed, in the house, I got a smell initially of St. Bruno tobacco. I knew it was him, so I spoke to him. And then a few weeks or days after that, my wife said to me, "Kevin, you're not going to believe this, but I can smell St. Bruno tobacco." So I said, "Oh, it's Uncle Alec, he's here." And she realized that then. But then he would come and sit in the house, and he would sit in a chair, and I could feel his vibrational frequency where he was sat, because I'm sensitive to those higher frequencies. And he became a nuisance. So after a while, I banned him from the house. And I told him, "Look, Alec, you've got to move on. You've passed now. You've gone to those higher levels of consciousness. You can't keep, you can't keep coming down here." And he would sit in the car with me. The smell of this St. Bruno tobacco, and he just wouldn't leave me alone. Anyway, so I banned him. And then when I was asked to write the book, I was reflecting on what to put in the book. And I thought about Uncle Alec. I thought, well, Kevin, that was cruel. That was mean, banning him from the house. So I said to him, "Alec, I apologize." I said, "I'm sorry I banned you from the house, but you were becoming a nuisance. You're quite welcome to come back and visit anytime." Bearing in mind, this is about 30 years later, and I'm in Florida, and that was in the UK where I lived then. So nothing happened. Then a couple of days later, I was watching the TV, and there was that smell of St. Bruno tobacco again. So it came through. So I knew it was there. So I spoke to him, and I said to him, "Look, you're quite welcome. I'm sorry I banned you. You're welcome anytime, but don't become a nuisance." I didn't mention it to Sandy because it'd been 30 years since he passed. A couple of days later, Sandy's cooking in the kitchen, and she says, "Kevin, you're not going to believe this. I feel that somebody stood next to me, and I can smell St. Bruno tobacco." She didn't have the conversation with him that I can have. I said, "Oh, yes, it's Alex." I apologized to him for banning him. And I think it came back once after that. He hasn't been since, and he won't, because he knows he's welcome. But I mean, it's quite an interesting story, because it travels from one side of the world to this side of the world. And, even though our family and friends have deceased, you can still hurt their feelings by being mean to them. It's just, but he was a pest. He's not now. And I speak to him occasionally, as I do with many of my past friends and family.
So do you think that full disclosure will only happen when enough of us on the planet here have raised our vibration, and they're just waiting for that?
I think that's what's happening. That's the idea of getting the information out there in relation to consciousness itself. And once you have that tipping balance of when it's in all our consciousness. It's part of our reality. The ETs are part of my reality. My deceased family and friends are part of my reality. I'm just in the physical at this moment in time, but my reality is different to theirs because I am in the physical. But other people here on Earth, once they realize that they can communicate and expand their knowledge, then it gives a paradigm shift of us as a species. And I'm sure once we do that, and you can see now, I look back and I see the steps that have been taken. And there are many, I've only been talking about now for about 5 years, but there's people that have been doing it for 10, 20, 30 years. Look at Kathleen Marden. I think you've had her on your show. She's had contact and her family have had contact, and she's been speaking out about it for over 30 years. And there are many others that have done that. And it's a continuing journey, but we are reaching that pinnacle of a paradigm shift in consciousness itself. When you think consciousness is the creator, using thought and consciousness of the reality, once you think about it, you can create it. And that's what we're doing now. We're creating it. We're already creating it by discussing. It's part of our normal reality. I talk about it every day to different groups, different people, because it's who I am. I mean, if I was interested in another subject, I'd be talking about that subject. But yeah, I'm still very excited for the future, Jeff.
Did they give you any tips for us to be able to raise our own vibration?
No, I can't think of any specific tips, other than being, from my own perspective, being open-minded, asking questions, ask for help from your guides, from your ETs. They are here. They're around us all the time. Our deceased family members are around. We just have to be open-minded to the fact that they are and see the signs that they give us in relation to who we are. I know I was speaking to my brother a few months ago, and he's a retired aircraft engineer. He worked in the UK, had his own business, and then he retired to Spain a few years ago. And I was speaking to him on the phone one day, and he said, "Kevin, you can't believe the size of the butterflies here. They're huge." And he's got a place that overlooks the Mediterranean. I said, "Well, why don't you ask the butterflies to come and land on your hand?" And he said, "They won't do that." I said, "Well, why don't you go onto the balcony now and see if you can do that?" So I went out on the balcony. A butterfly came past, a big one. I said, "Oh, you'll need a reason. You'll have to tell it you want to see the beautiful colours on its wings. Otherwise, it won't come." So he went out reluctantly, and I said, "Right, hold up your hand." So he held up his hand. A butterfly came across, it flew past. He asked it, it out of sight, it turned around, it came back, and it landed on his fingers. Bearing in mind, he'd been there 3 years, and he just watching them go back to the phones. I said, "Right, now what you need to do, you want to ask it to go away, come back with a friend, because you want to compare the colours on the wings of the different butterflies." So the butterfly was on his fingers, it took off, out of sight, came back, landed on his fingers, brought a friend with him, and it landed on his forehead. I got photographs of it. And he was amazed. He had 14 landings of butterflies on him that day. He'd been there about 3 years by this time. Nothing had happened. What happened there was he was using thought and consciousness as the conduit for communication for the insect realm. And what I do it not only with the insect realms, not only with the animals and the plants and the trees, but to the higher levels of consciousness, which includes the ETs, the higher conscious beings. So that's just a simple example. And now, after that, he went out on his balcony with his wife. He says, "Go on, I'll ask the butterflies to come and land on you." And the butterflies came down, landed on her arm, and she was amazed by it. So I now call him the butterfly whisperer. But that's just a simple example of using consciousness for education and communication. So quite simple. And we'd say because he's a nuts and bolts man, but it's opened up his reality now. He's enjoying nature more. He appreciates the nature. The seagulls all come round now and fly around his place, where they didn't used to before. They're always flying around. Why? Because he's made that connection to a different realm of consciousness, and we're all connected. And once you realize that, we evolve as a species.
Kevin, before we finish up, Can you share with us any other messages that the ETs have for us?
I would just say that they are here to assist with our evolution. They want to help us. We are not to be frightened by them. They are willing to share their technologies with us. They are willing to share their technologies to help us with the pollution that we've created on our planet. And I think that if we are to evolve as a species, yes, we have to do it ourselves, but we need to reach that level of consciousness as you discussed in relation to how many people understand that. And that's why it's important getting the message out. And that's why it's important that you have your shows and have people on the show like myself, because we're engaging in expanding our consciousness and our understanding of who we are.
Kevin, thank you for that message, and thank you for being my guest.
Thank you for having me on your show, Jeff. I've enjoyed chatting with you.
Likewise. Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.